If you would like more videos made on the Israel Adesanya vs Jan Blachowicz fight, then be sure to show this by smashing the like button. Thank you for joining me once again, and welcome back to Keenan KTV. In this video, I will be talking about the Israel Adesanya vs Jan Blachowicz light heavyweight championship fight, in which I will be mainly discussing why Israel Adesanya will be able to defeat Jan Blachowic. I will also be making another video talking about why Jan can defeat Adesanya, so be sure to like and subscribe with the bell notification turned on so you don't miss it when it drops. And now with that being said, let us jump right into the video. When you have a fighter like Israel Adesanya who has completely beaten all the competition he has had in his own division and is about to move up to a higher weight class, they tend to be pretty successful. And now, especially when the light heavyweight division has a new champion in Jan Blachowic over Jon Bones Jones, who has been dominating the majority of the last decade at that division, you might think to yourself, well, this individual is a lesser champion, and I personally would not disagree. Comparing Jon Jones with Jan Blachowic, the difference is night and day. Is what I would call an S-rank fighter, and if I'm being generous, Jan Blachowicz is probably a B or B-. And then if I have to rate Israel Adesanya, I personally rate him an S-rank fighter as well. And so automatically, if you're going to ask me, Keenan, who is the more skilled fighter, Israel Adesanya is clearly the more skilled fighter. However, when you're moving up in a division and you're fighting fighters who are naturally taller, bigger, stronger, and more durable than the opponents that you were fighting at 185, perhaps you're going to be changing a few things around and your power will be less effective on those guys. However, in return, you have an individual who is faster, has quicker reflexes, moves a lot more nimble, is a lot more harder to time, especially with those guys that you're comparing Adesanya with. The difference is night and day. Adesanya, come fight night, will be a very quick fighter, perhaps probably the quickest Jan Blachowicz has ever fought. Another point would be this: I have oftentimes said that when it comes to Jon Jones and the light heavyweights that he has fought, more often than not, these individuals were coming up from 185. The Chael Sonnenses, fighters like Rashad Evans and Lyoto Machida, who are just blown up middleweights essentially, fighters like Vitor Belfort, all these guys who were fighting at 205 that Jon Jones has faced, all were undersized against him. And as soon as Jon Jones fought a fighter who was about the same measurements as him in Gustafsson and Dominic Reyes, who did not walk in on him and try and chase him down, essentially bringing the fight to Jon Jones, you immediately saw Jon Jones struggle with coming forward himself, because he's not really accustomed of doing that, because the dynamic in his fights always ended up with him on the outside at the greater distance with his 84-inch reach. And why this is relevant is because when you're going to be taking that into account for Jan Blachowicz, you would assume that fighting middleweights would be a lot easier for him. However, Adesanya is one of those exceptions. Standing in at 6'4" tall with an 80-inch reach, Adesanya come fight night will still be the bigger fighter. Perhaps not in muscle mass or pure weight, but in height and reach. And that is something that I can immediately say will benefit the experience Israel Adesanya is going to be having in that ring. And it is going to be offsetting Jan Blachowicz because he's not going to have that advantage that Jon Jones has had for all these years. So what does this really mean, Israel Adesanya being bigger than most middleweights? For Adesanya, it means that moving up in a weight class, going up in weight, will be less drastic than what another fighter would feel like. For example, Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold, when these two fighters moved up, they did not really do well in that division. Partly because they were over the hill and moving up in weight class probably felt like the grass was greener on the other side because they didn't have to cut weight, and partly it was because they were not light heavyweight fighters. So Israel Adesanya will not have the same troubles those fighters have had building themselves up. Facing Jan Blachowicz, Adesanya will be facing somebody who is a lot more durable. So in that regard, he will have to adjust to the opponent, but he doesn't really need to adjust himself to the weight class all too much. And so come fight night, Adesanya is not going to be focusing on bulking up in weight weight than trying to get big and be as strong as Jan Blachowic, because there's no point in doing that. So what he will do is take all of his advantages and maximize it to a great length. And come fight night in the striking department, to what length will Adesanya's advantages play out at? The most important aspect in the striking department where Adesanya will shine at is taking the outside of the fight. Going into a fighter like Jan Blachowic is a big mistake. Jan is tremendous at pulling back and connecting with a check hook as you're walking in on him with tremendous force. There is this notion going around that says if Jan Blachowic can connect one time, it will be really troublesome for Adesanya. Well, perhaps that is true, in the sense of if Adesanya were to stand right in front of him and then Jan Blachowic loads up on a big right and then just connects on him flush while Adesanya's hands are behind his back, well, obviously he's going to be knocking him out. However, more often than not, Jan Blachowic's knockout victories have come when the opponents are walking in on him, and he's not particularly good at walking you down and then connecting with one clean hit that stuns you and puts you down. He hurts and puts you down in barrages, punches, and bunches. And so the way he achieves this is, in my opinion, a very great skill or technique to have against a fighter like Adesanya. This technique is when Jan Blachowic tries to close in a distance, he likes to throw the right straight, shift his weight, step in, and cover a lot of distance. Now, this right straight is not really meant to knock you down or hurt you. It is simply a smokescreen for him to step in and then come over the shoulder with a big loaded left hook. Now, when Adesanya fights most of his opponents, they tend to kind of always stick behind a jab, or at least they try, and then they try and walk in. And that is exactly when Adesanya is able to pull back on the first initial jab or the lead hand, let you walk in, and then slip in a counter and then move out of the way. But now the patterns are switched. The big punch comes in first, and then the lead hand, which is quote unquote weaker, is now the stronger hand with all of the momentum coming in. I would say that this is a big problem for Adesanya, but in reality it is not. You will hear some say that Adesanya likes to pull and lean back a lot, but in reality Adesanya doesn't really pull back or lean back on just any shot. He first baits the first jab, lets you walk in, step back, then pull, and then counter. So the idea that Adesanya will immediately just pull back on the first right that Jan Blachowic will throw is, in my opinion, unreasonable and not logical. So what this really will mean is this: Adesanya will anticipate the right straight and then the left hook coming in all night long. It is a simple tool, and if it weren't for the size and power and just the pure, fully fledged light heavyweight that Jan Blachowic is, I would have said that he's not going to have that much of a shot. But since Blachowic is a fully fledged light heavyweight, it will be pretty difficult for Adesanya to gain the respect of Blachowic, as he's just neglecting Adesanya's power and just rushing Adesanya. In that regard, the more he tries, the more chances he has to connect on the big left hook that could perhaps rock him, and then from there on, Blachowic can throw his barrage of punches on the inside. He has great uppercuts and left hooks that can potentially rock and hurt and finish him, but the likelihood of the fight going there is pretty slim. Because of this reason, as I said, Jan Blachowic is a patient fighter. He's not too active, and when you're going to be a patient fighter against a fighter who is taller than you and has a longer reach than you and is a better kickboxer than you, you will get zoned out if you don't try to close in the range. And Adesanya, he is in a very favorable stylistical matchup against Jan Blachowic because Jan is a fighter who is not light on his feet, who is not elusive, who is not hard to hit. And so immediately when the fight opens up and Israel Adesanya comes forward, starts to feint high and low with his punches, and then snaps the first leg kick in the fight, you will get the immediate tone of what will happen. Adesanya is in control, kicking the leg, being on the outside and feinting, and every single time Jan Blachowic will try and force his way in, Adesanya will stop it even before it happens and just get out of the way. He is that fast, he's that nimble, he's that quick. And from there, pretty much Jan Blachowic will be fighting a ghost. The more he misses, the more he does not land, the more he cannot throw, the more he will get frustrated, and the more mistakes he will make. A great example of this is his fight with Thiago Santos, in which Thiago and Jan Blachowic were both patient. The main difference was Thiago Santos has great leg kicks and he was able to utilize them. And as the first and second round got to an end where they were both pretty much trying to get the field for one another, Jan Blachowic was getting kicked to the leg the entire time. And the only time Jan Blachowic was frustrated enough and felt like he had to commit on a big strike and lunged in for a range closer, he got clipped and knocked out. Now, Thiago Santos is a way more powerful fighter than Israel Adesanya. However, it does not take a lot to put a fighter down with the right shot. And so when the first and second round come to an end and Adesanya has controlled the range and everything in it, I believe at some point Jan Blachowic is going to get desperate. He will try and close the range with his body kicks, right straight left hook over the top, but I believe it will be a rushed effort. And the more he rushes each effort, the more openings Adesanya will find, lead, and I believe at that point Adesanya will find the perfect shot to counter and drop Jan Blachowic. And from there on, I think Adesanya will be able to connect with a lot more significant strikes and perhaps get a TKO knockout victory. Or it can go the other way when it comes down to Adesanya deciding to not really fully engage on every single counter opportunity that he has and decide to play it a little bit more safe and cruise to a unanimous decision victory. When it comes to grappling in this matchup, when it comes to Adesanya, I don't believe he will be attempting any takedowns. When it comes to Jan Blachowicz, I do believe that he will attempt a lot of grappling exchanges, which I will be talking about in the Why Jan Blachowicz Will Beat Adesanya video. Because in the end, this was merely why Israel, the last stylebender Adesanya, defeats Jan Blachowicz. As in the end, only time will tell what will truly happen. So leave in the comment section down below who you think will win come fight night. And as always, I have been Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.